I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm back from vacation. Hope you had a great week. I'm banged up and bruised. All 7 grandchildren here at once. And so the tide has gone out, and I got my 6 miles in today. So I'm back working again, and I'm kind of moving normally. To kick off a week back from vacation, I'm so pleased to welcome old friend Congressman Jason Chaffetz. Used to represent Utah in the House of Representatives, now on Fox News, where you see him frequently. Jason in the House on X. Hello, Jason. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Congratulations surviving the grandkids. I get it.
Uh, yeah, oh, the back hurts, but it was joy filled. I got my hand. They're coming for you. Your brand new book. They're coming for you. And Frank Luntz says we've got to say the title 7 times. They're coming for you. They're coming for you. They're coming for you. I'll let you get a little bit more. I'm kind of stunned at the hunger for more and more invasive data collection. What prompted you to get into this subject matter, Jason Chaffetz?
When I started to learn how invasive it was, it's not just about making sure that your phone gives you information about how to find a better cup of coffee. I was shocked through my time in Congress and afterwards as I learned even more about how much data is collected by our government and is sold by our government. Our government is buying and selling data. And these AI companies, the Metas, the Googles, Alphabets of the world, are using these things for some very nefarious purposes. And I think most people are terribly naive about what's happening, how their data is bought, sold, and used in perpetuity. And it scares me about the future of our country.
I count me among the naive. I signed up for Clear years ago, and I'm gladly put my
Yeah.
eyes in front of the machine in every airport, thinking that, well, this is secure. But they sell data. I didn't realize that. Did I agree to that when I signed up for Clear?
Yeah, you did. And what most people don't realize is there are companies out there, data brokers. It's nearly a $500 billion a year industry at this point, where they are buying and selling your facial recognition. And what they can do once they have your facial recognition, they can match that with other data points. For instance, in the state of Florida, I would have never guessed this, but it used to be that when they would collect your driver's license information. So a 16-year-old goes to get her driver's license, name, height, weight, does she wear glasses, what is her eye color, all of that. Plus they capture her picture. The state of Florida was selling that information to data brokers, even though you paid to get your driver's license. And so
See,
that was a revenue stream for them.
did the governor make that stop? Because that happened in California. They had to come to an end in California when I
Yeah.
lived there a decade ago. Has Florida put a stop to the selling of state collected information?
I believe so, but I don't know how many other states are doing the same types of things, and so you just wonder, okay, where is this? And the other thing that I know, you look, you're an attorney, you're very keen on this. Law enforcement has figured out that what they can do, Hugh, is they could never go get a warrant to follow you or track you. Certainly since the Jones case, and they can't track you, but they believe that they can go purchase that data about you, and that doesn't violate our Fourth Amendment rights. And so you see government at all levels, whether it be the Pentagon, the FBI, any law enforcement, DEA, et cetera, even local law enforcement purchasing this data. And the other thing that people are naive about is I could go to a data broker. You tell me anybody's person, and I can put a geofence around you. I can tell you every phone that came within 50 feet of that particular address for, I don't know, last 3 months. You just tell me how long you want to look. And there's a way to buy that data. And they can tell exactly what you've done, who's visited you, who's come by to see you. That information is readily available in the markets today.
On almost every page of They're Coming for You, there's another story that will make you sit up and say, that can't be true. For example, do you know what the two sites have in common that I'm about to name? One is Muslim Pro, that's a prayer site for Muslims, and another is Grinder, which is a gay dating hookup site. What do they have in common, Jason Chaffetz? They sell their
Uh,
data.
they sell their data. They're buying it, but then more importantly, they're selling it. And when they can match that with your facial recognition, and then be able to tap into all these cameras when you're able to go somewhere, look out. They can tell a lot about you, and you may be something more salacious like that. It could be if you're going to a cancer clinic. It could be if you're going to a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It could be if you're at a political rally. And that's the concern, is that they're using this to manipulate elections. And that has been used in a big, big way.
I'm going to come back to facial recognition in a moment, but you reminded me. A headline this afternoon is that Texas Democrats end walkout, ensuring GOP redistricting plans pass. My guess is that the next round of redistricting is going to be ruthless for every state that is either all red or all blue. And ruthless depends upon data. Now, it's unconstitutional to use data, racial data, and probably gender data. But they don't really need that. Those are kind of blunt instruments compared to the kind of data you're talking about. Am I right?
Oh, yeah. There is an executive order, 14019, that Biden put out in March of it when he became the president. And this was a concerted effort to use all the federal resources, both physical locations, personnel, and data. And imagine how much data they have, whether you're a Social Security recipient, if you're on SNAP, all these types of data bites. And what they did is they leveraged, for instance, housing and urban development, and they would target certain areas, or the Small Business Administration. They went into Michigan, for instance. The book highlights this, and they talk about how they targeted certain areas to get out the vote, make sure certain people were registered. They even did this with the U.S. Marshals. If you were in custody, they did this. And probably the most nefarious one that I saw, Hugh, that I read about, is what's called Vote ER. And that is these emergency room doctors. It was started by a person who said, hey,
Yes.
what we can do is when we have patients, we're going to go to them, even though they may be sedated or under influence of drugs. Even people were in psych wards or mental hospitals. They were going and registering them to vote. And you can tell a lot about a patient if you have that information. And they literally gathered several million bits of information about patients while they're in the hospital. Forget your HIPAA laws. I mean, they literally did this, the Democrats.
Jason, in terms of redistricting, though, do you expect Texas is going to go first? California is going to go to the ballot in November to get an amendment to the state constitution which mandates an independent redistricting commission. I don't know if it'll pass or not. But do you agree with me that it's all going to be hyper manipulated and basically we're going to have non-competitive districts everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, 98% of people that run for re-election are already statistically going to be re-elected. It's going to get even worse, though. I mean, Texas already had this and allowed this, but for California to go back and change the way they do things and abandon their so-called, independent commission is just sort of laughable. But Democrats do this to their own peril, because if every state did it, Republicans are going to win that fight in a big, big way. Their margins will get even bigger.
Yeah, that is what's going to happen. And I don't know that Governor Newsom is as popular or persuasive as he thinks he is. I want to go back to the Colonial May 2021 break-in of Colonial Pipeline. You write on page 110, that was a watershed moment in our American cybersecurity laws. Why does that one matter so much, Jason Chaffetz?
Well, part of my problem with the federal government is I don't trust them with our data. And they have been collecting so much, but they can't be trusted. We've had multiple break-ins and stealing of data, that being, one of the worst that is out there. And so the more the government collects the data, the more I worry about it, because not only, again, are they selling it, but it's prone to be stolen. And one of the things that the Chinese have done, for instance, is target everybody with a security clearance. That information is in the wind. And so, yeah. Oh my goodness, it's just, if you know everybody that has a security clearance, once you have one bit of information, you can go out and buy all the other bits of information, and you know exactly who these people are, where they are, who they're talking to, what they like, and they're prone to manipulation.
I will be back talking with Jason Chaffetz at the end of the show about his brand new book. They're coming for you. It's being released. Go and order it right now. It's available if you go and order it at Amazon or at Barnes & Noble or your local bookstore, probably in airports by the time you travel next. Go and get it. Get woken up to the fact that you're being watched and people are selling data about you. And what we do about that, well, you have to stick around in the show to hear Jason a little bit later to find out what to do about it. Joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton. Senator Cotton is the third ranking member of the House of the Senate Republican. He's also chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. So he's watching very closely, I'm sure, all that is going on at the White House at this hour. Good afternoon, Senator Cotton. What do you make of what we saw last week in Alaska and what's going on today at the White House?
Good afternoon, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you. I'm obviously not at the White House, not privy to everything that's happening, but from the excerpts I've seen, it seems to be going well. That President Trump and President Zelensky have a good rapport, and President Zelensky is clearly committed to a constructive visit that tries to move towards a negotiation that will result in some kind of peace settlement in Ukraine that will help protect his country's autonomy and territorial integrity and allow them to build for the future and get back on their feet, so to speak. It looks like several European leaders, too, are playing a constructive role. Everybody there acknowledges that this happened because of Vladimir Putin, who has a almost unquenchable appetite to reincorporate Ukraine into a greater Russian empire and launch this unprovoked war of aggression over 3 years ago, in part because Democratic presidents like Barack Obama and Joe Biden had tempted him to pursue what he had always wanted to do. Even Vladimir Putin said last week that this war wouldn't have happened if President Trump had been in office, as it didn't happen in his first term in office. So I think right now we're still in the phase where everyone, President Trump, Zelensky, the European leaders, are testing whether Vladimir Putin is serious about any kind of peace negotiation. And if he's not, then we're going to have to collectively continue to show the strength that Ukraine and the United States have shown for the last 3.5 years.
Yeah, Senator, I have a column coming out in Fox News tomorrow that every opinion about this is really ill-informed because unless you were in both rooms, the room in Alaska and the White House today, you can't really know what's going on in the state of President Trump's team and President Trump. I am curious, though, since the term security guarantees isn't much on the minds and lips of many newsreaders, what does that mean to you, security guarantees?
Well, I think traditionally and customarily, Hugh, it would mean something like the Article 5 collective guarantee of the NATO treaty that all NATO members make to each other, that an attack on one will be viewed as an attack on all, and they'll all come to the victim of aggression's defense. If you're sitting in Ukraine, I'm not sure how comfortable that would make one, though. Remember, Bill Clinton gave security guarantees to Ukraine along with Boris Yeltsin, Vladimir Putin's predecessor, and other Western leaders. And when Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014, where was Barack Obama? He was nowhere to be found, sending nothing but meals ready to eat and blankets. It was only President Trump that started sending real weapons to Ukraine in his first term that allowed them to beat back Russia's attack on Kyiv in the early days of this war. So if you're sitting in Ukraine and you've already suffered from Democratic presidents making and then ignoring security guarantees, you probably think that the main guarantees that you care about are tanks and artillery cannons and drones and men under arms. That's the way to guarantee your security for real.
Senator, can you imagine American troops being stationed in Ukraine? Because I cannot.
I don't think that we need to station troops there. And I think President Trump, although not necessarily ruling it out, has indicated that he doesn't want to have American troops there. European nations have said they're willing to put troops there, and some have already been more aggressive in allowing their military and intelligence personnel to be there for the sake of training. The United States, of course, is providing a lot of weapons, both directly and through our NATO partners. We've also provided a lot of intelligence and logistics support as well. So I think the United States can continue to support Ukraine in that way if this war goes on without having to put any American troops in harm's way inside of Ukraine.
Now, I want to switch to Gaza if I can, Senator. You led combat platoons and patrols in Baghdad when it was a very, very much not a friendly city. Gaza is even denser in population. I believe Gaza City might be the most densely populated city on the planet. What does the IDF have in front of it, and what do you think of their plan to move forward to clear and hold Gaza City?
Yeah, well, Hugh, first off, not to minimize the threats faced by any American who served in Baghdad over the years, but it really pales in comparison to what we faced or what the IDF faces in Gaza. For instance, in Baghdad, no American troops had to worry about an underground tunnel network in which you could have ambushes pop up from trap doors or through other openings at any point, putting aside questions of density. But it's going to be very hard fighting. There's no doubt about it. And they're going to, unfortunately, take on more casualties. But as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, as President Trump said, as I've insisted now for 18 months, the best way to end this war, the best way to get those hostages back is to keep the military pressure on Hamas. And Israel, as is often the case, has gone the extra mile because it knows it gets singled out for unfair and really unique treatment by the political leaders and media around the world, and it goes, again, above and beyond the demands of the laws of war. But hopefully their final push here into Gaza City will once and for all deal the death blow to Hamas and not just bring those hostages back, but also free the people of Gaza from the suffering they've endured under Hamas now for 18 years.
And a last question, Senator. A lot of our, quote, allies, and they have been allies historically, but it's now Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, have all brought pressure to bear on the equal of any of them, Israel, in terms of our alliance structure. Are you surprised, and do you expect it to come up at the White House today? Because states that won't support Israel after it's been invaded and its people massacred, and its people still continue to be hostile, I'm not sure how reliable they are.
I'm very disappointed, Hugh. I can't say that I'm surprised. Many of these European leaders have political problems of their own at home. This is an easy way for them to distract away from those problems, a tried and true method of any politician. It's relatively cost-free to them. It doesn't harm them in any way, even though it makes things much harder for Israel and, by extension, the United States, since we're Israel's chief backer. And third, I think some of them just made an electoral calculation. In France and in Great Britain, for instance, the center-left parties there depend much more on Muslim votes than they do on Jewish votes. You've got a number of Labour members of Parliament, for instance, in the UK who need Muslim votes to get elected, and they're making a crass political calculation, which unfortunately ends up rewarding terrorism and making Hamas that much less likely to capitulate when they see that they've got prominent European leaders coming to their aid.
I agree completely. Senator Cotton, thank you. Look forward to talking to you next week when we have more to consider in evaluating what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Thank you, Senator. Time for my relief factor, and boy, do I need it now. A week with 7 grandkids. All but one have left. And what was a gathering of 17 members of the family is now down to 5, and so it's manageable. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you just saw me take it. It's that easy. Now, why do I do that? I got my 10K in this morning, beginning to ease back into the normal routine, get ready for the show in the normal way. Last week was just chasing 3-year-olds. That's really all it was chasing 3-year-olds. And when they turn on you suddenly and headbutt you, that also hurts. But Relief Factor comes to your aid. It get rid of those minor aches and pains that come from chasing 3-year-olds. Whether you're 30 or 60 or wherever in between, anyone older, anyone younger, Relief Factor will work for you. Call 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief to get a starter pack for $19.95, 3-week supply, less than $1 a day. That's 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, or visit their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Guess what? I'm back after vacation. So glad you're here with me. Thank you for tuning in today, whether you're watching on the Salem News Channel or listening to one of our great affiliates. Greetings. The big story of the day, of course, is in Washington, D.C., where President Trump is meeting at this hour with President Zelensky of Ukraine and a half dozen European allies and Secretary General of NATO figure out next steps following the President's summit with Vladimir Putin on Friday in Alaska. The big story of the day is that Texas Democrats are giving up on their fight to stop the redistricting of the Texas congressional delegation, so that will be for a foregone conclusion. There will be new districts. At least 5 more competitive ones. Not quite sure whether or not the Republicans are going to win all or some of those 5. Gavin Newsom is vowing to take a constitutional amendment to the ballot on November 4th in response. Meanwhile, Ohio also has to redraw its districts. That's by law in Ohio and Florida. probably going to do that. Our friend Danny Perez, the Speaker of the Florida Assembly, has put together a special redistricting committee. Lots happening there. Let me first, however, tell you about one of our sponsors, Consumer Cellular. Now, I got Consumer Cellular recently, and I've been telling you, do one thing before you call. You definitely should call Consumer Cellular, 1-800-411 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. One more time, 1-800-411-4454. Before you call, look at your cell phone bill. How much data are you actually using? How much data are you buying? Have you looked at the hidden fees and the surcharges? Have you noticed that your bill has gone up recently? After you check your bill, check out Consumer Cellular, where you really do get savings without sacrifice. It only takes about 20 minutes to switch, and you'll get $25 off using the code HUGH25 when you call 1-800-411-4454. Remember, HUGH25. Or you can log on directly to consumercellular.com/Hugh. New customers get a $5 credit on their first 5 monthly invoices. You can visit consumercellular.com/Hugh for details. And do not forget, if you are 50 or older, you get 2 unlimited lines for $60. That's $30 each line, unlimited data. You can better manage your cost of living, your essential expenses by using Consumer Cellular, and you get $25 off using my promo code HUGH25. Savings without sacrifice. Don't forget HUGH25, 1-800-411-4454. Now, NPR is a left-wing organization, so I expect them to be biased, and they are. But they did do a rundown of the states that might be redistricting in the wake of the Texas decision. One of them is Ohio. Now, Ohio's got nothing to do with Texas or California. It's obliged to redistrict because the state constitution mandates that redistricting when the two parties can't agree on the map. So there's going to be a new group of districts in Ohio, and it's probably going to favor Republicans. Also possible that Indiana is going to pick up its cudgels. Governor Mike Braun has indicated he's open to that. Florida and Missouri, it looks like it's all going the Republican way. But wait. California, which has a constitutional amendment passed a decade ago, and I still live there, in a, quote, independent redistricting commission, which is immediately stacked and taken over by the Democrats. They won't tell you that. It's a classic con job of many years ago because they didn't want to take the fall for actually drawing districts that favor Democrats the way that districts favor Democrats in Illinois. But Gavin Newsom wants to be president. He wants their nomination. And the way you get that is by doing stunts. Now, this is going to be a stunt. You're going to get a special session in the legislature, which has got nothing else to do, for example, like clear away all the red tape that is stopping people from rebuilding in the neighborhoods that burned down because of the negligence of the city and the state of California in January. They could go about getting rid of the train to nowhere in the Central Valley. Instead, they're going to spend money on a special election to amend the Constitution to jettison an independent, nonpartisan redistricting commission, which isn't nonpartisan, and which I really won't be sorry to see go. Because to me, I've been consistent for 35 years in the business. Redistricting is a political act that is necessarily a political act. And I expect political actors to maximize their ability to send people to Washington, D.C. That's what Illinois does. That's what Massachusetts does. That's what Republican states do as well. So gloves off everywhere. There are more states that are wholly red than there are wholly blue. There are more congressional districts that can be gerrymandered wholly red than there are that can be gerrymandered wholly blue. So Gavin Newsom said fight fire with fire, an unfortunate turn of phrase for the governor to use. I'm all for that. But I want the legislators in Indiana and the legislators in Utah and the legislators in Missouri and the legislators in Florida and, of course, in Ohio where they have to do it, to take note. It is time to get in the game and draw the district to win because the country is overwhelmingly Republican. The approval rating of Democrats have never been lower because they're crazier and crazier by the day. So I'm looking forward to the elections of 2026. Usually the electoral tide is that the party that holds the White House loses seats. We'll see about it this time. A lot of jokers in the deck this time. A little media news today. I spent 4 years working for MNBC and MSNBC. 4 long years, from 2016 to 2020. And we disliked each other enough that we voluntarily agreed to separate and go our separate ways before the contract was even over. And a lot of that had to do with MSNBC being, well, out of its mind. And I don't talk about individuals, but the network has always been sort of diseased and so far left that it represents wokeism at its worst. Woke from the morning to the evening. And the Republicans and conservatives who show up there are one of two sorts, missionaries or exiles. I was one of the missionaries. I really was interested in trying to persuade people, look, there's a serious center right here in the country that you ought to be engaging with, and they just were not interested. That's fine. More power to them. NBC woke up that MSNBC was bleeding into their brand and killing it. So they decided they were going to spin off MSNBC along with CNBC and Oxygen. They have a bunch of cable networks under the NBC Universal standard. And MSNBC has been sold or about to be sold. So they're changing their name to MS Now, which stands for My Source News Opinion World. Now, really, My Source News Opinion World, MS Now. It's still MS, 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 MS. And it's still wokest of all the networks, which is fine because there's 1% of the country that is irredeemably left-wing and woke. It will never change. It will always be that way. But the sooner the NBC gets clear of that group, the better off. Now, how the divorce works out, I don't know. Because I spent a lot of time in 30 Rock. MS was on the third floor and NBC was on the fourth floor, and I was usually on the fourth floor and occasionally on the third floor. And in D.C., they're all smashed up together. And so I don't know how they're going to move studios or what talent's going where. And by talent, I'm using that as a category, not as a applause or admonition. It's just a category, on-air broadcast talent. If you're watching me on the Salem News Channel, I'm talent for the Salem News Channel. I'm talent for Fox News as a contributor. I'll be on with Hannity tonight, by the way. Tune in. I hope we're talking about good news out of this summit, but I have no idea, and I'm not going to guess. I've already filed my Fox News column for tomorrow, which says, if someone tells you they know what's going on in the negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States, they're lying. They don't know. The only person who really knows is President Trump, because he was in the room with Putin, and he was in the room with Zelensky, in the room with the Europeans. Some of the Europeans think they will know, and there's leaks all over the place. Just don't believe any of them. Don't believe any of them. None of them are in a position to actually tell you the truth about what's going on. Now, let me give you some good news. College football is 4 days away. Saturday noon, they kick off Iowa State, I believe, in Dublin. I'm not sure they're playing. It's not a game that's high on my list, but at least real football is back. Meanwhile, the Cleveland Browns signed a wide receiver out of Texas who had been under investigation for sexual assault. And Quinshon Judkins, who's the running back the Browns really need, has been cleared. There will be no charges pressed against him. And always felt funny to me what that circumstances was. Now, I have a hard and fast rule. If you hit a woman, you should go to jail. If you do. And it's intentional and you actually hit a woman. It's also something I've been saying on air for years since I was at KCET in LA. If your husband or your partner strikes you, leave. Leave that day. And raise my sons never to hit a woman ever. And raise my daughter never ever even encourage your girls or your friends to stay with anybody who's a physically abusive person. So I am very, very adamant about this. I'm also adamant on the presumption of innocence. The NFL now has an allegation against Quinshon Judkins, which was taken very seriously by Florida police, and they dismissed it. They said, nah, nothing here. We're not bringing this case. The NFL is, quote, still investigating, and the Browns are still trying to figure out what to do because they don't want to sign and pay for someone that the NFL might decide on their whim that they want to bench for a few years to make a lesson out of him. Now, that did not happen with the other young man from Texas. But to the NFL, I just got to say, when you've been cleared in the United States of America. When you are, unless you're charged, even when you're charged, you're presumed innocent. But when the police have had a look at an allegation, a very close look, there's no video evidence here. They talked to the alleged victim of the assault. They talked to Mr. Judkins. Nothing there that they want to go to court on. The NFL should close the book and let the fans know there might be a contractual impasse. He's a second rounder, and there are a lot of people in the second round that want their money guaranteed. But I'm feeling pretty good about the Browns after the Eagles. Now, I'm on in Philadelphia right now. I'm sorry, but the Browns defense owned your offense, so you're in trouble. I'm very sorry to tell you this, Philly. You are in big trouble because the Myles Garrett-led Browns defense, Jim Schwartz coach, Browns defense just owned you throughout the 2 days of team contact practices and the exhibition game on Saturday. They just owned you. Now, we have Dylan Byers, and we got Shedeur Sanders. We got Kenny Pickett, and we have a starter. His name is Joe Flacco. He's 40 years old. Good old Joe is back. He's going to lead the Browns into Week 1 in Cleveland against Cincinnati. We shall see. I will not be at the game. In fact, I won't be at any game. I was looking at the schedule this year. It's just not going to work because of where I've got to be and what I've got to do and when I've got to do it. So my brother will get rid of the tickets. I said, don't give away the Packers tickets. I got to offer them to a couple of Packers fans first to find out whether or not they want to travel. Packers fans are almost as crazy as Browns fans. But there's also football news. The Ohio State University named Sayin as their QB today over Kleineltz, who comes from South Dakota. We were close to having the first ever South Dakota quarterback play for anyone who mattered. But sorry, Lincoln, not going to work. I imagine he's portal bound next year because it came this close. So he must be a stud. He also got the Iron Buckeye Award, which is when you just amaze people with your work ethic and your leadership qualities. Ryan Day and his team of coaches named someone an Iron Buckeye. Lincoln Kleinholtz got that, but he's not going to start. Julian Sayan's going to start, and the Buckeyes are going to be the national champions repeat. By the way, Michigan got punished badly for cheating, so the Buckeyes didn't really lose 4 in a row to Michigan. They lost 1 in a row because the cheating was over by the time they lost last year. But the 3 before that, cheater. But the cheaters are all gone. The coaches are all gone. One of them still suspended. That brings you up to speed on everything I did besides cheat 3-year-olds last week. Heading into the close, let me do a market report for you, brought to you by American Federal. American Federal buys and sells gold, 800-221-7694. Call Nick Grovich and his team at 1-800-221-7694. American Federal Gold and Coin and Bullion has been doing this for 44 years. I know Nick. My friends know Nick. I and my wife bought gold from Nick. I will encourage everyone who's out there who's a new listener. American Federal is just trustworthy, very transparent. If you're diversifying, you're taking money off of the market because you've made a lot of money this year, never hurts to take some profits and to diversify. I'll talk with Ty Lassiter a little bit later about real estate diversification. But gold is part of every diversified portfolio I know of. Stocks, bonds, cash, dirt, precious metals. Some people like silver. I'm not a big silver fan. It takes up too much space. Gold today is at $3,376 an ounce. So it is creeping back up towards 3,400 mark, $3,376 an ounce. That's not the price you'll pay because it'll change by the time you get money to Nick Grovich. But if you call Nick, 800-221-7694, and talk you through the details, you get him the money. You agree on the strike price when the money is there. You can wait, you can delay, but the money's got to be there because they don't do floats. They're not trying to steal money from you on the float. They're very upfront. And when I buy my gold from Nick, I call him up, I get him the money, and he gets me the gold. That's the best way to do it. And you can always visit AmericanFederal.com, but I would call him, 800-221-7694. Now, on the market today, nothing is going on. I mean, it is August. A lot of the people who run Wall Street get to the Hamptons, they get out of town. Nobody wants to be in New York in the second half of August. And boy, does it show, because the Dow is down 0.07%. The S&P is absolutely flat, and the NASDAQ is up 0.02. So there ain't nothing happening. That doesn't mean stocks aren't trading, and people show up, and they got people who are calling in orders, and they're rebalancing, and they're buying a little bit here, and they're buying a little bit there, they're selling. But there's just not going to be, absent major news, the only stocks. Well, I don't give stock advice. I was going to say, I think the only sector, this is not advice, the only sector I'm following closely is defense industries, because it seems to me the world is getting armed up all over the place. So I'm following the defense spiders and stuff like that. But if you want to buy gold because you need to diversify, do it with Nick Grovich and his team. 1-800-411-4454. Tell Nick you heard it from Hugh. By the way, if you're one of those people who like to collect coins, Nick will spend all day talking to you too. They got a little room for you people to go and talk. I'm not you and you are not me, And we are not together on that. But Nick not only just sells and buys gold from people like me who are in it just for diversification, he loves coins. It's been his hobby for as long as he's been in the business, 44 years. You can trust him. 800-221-7694. Coming up next hour, my friends, Vic Mattis will be here, and I'm going to give you a little lecture on what has happened to American media. I posted about it today over at my X account, Hugh Hewitt, but I want to share it with you because I'm kind of surprised by the number of people who respond to this. I canceled my subscription to The Atlantic today, and I'll tell you about why when I come back after the break. I want to begin by thanking Dwayne Patterson, Mark Davis, Kurt Schlichter for sitting in for me last week. I was juggling grandchildren. All 13 of us were gathered together, plus some in-laws, making a grand total of 15. And now the tide has gone out. There's only one left. And everyone's got to go back and get back to school, and the little ones have got to go to preschool and all that kind of stuff. So the tide went out. That's great. We had a great 3 full packed weeks of great deal of fun and joy. It's busy. I'm bruised, but we are very, very happy that we're blessed with such a wonderful family. I missed the summit as a result of taking the week off last week, but I did write a column about it anyway for Fox News tomorrow. The column says, unless you're in the room where it happened today in D.C., I think it's in the East Room where President Trump is meeting with President Zelensky as well as a half dozen other leaders from NATO countries. You really don't know what's happening in the East Room unless you're there when the reporters are not. And unless you're in Alaska, you don't really know what happened there. So everything is speculation. The only thing that matters is, do the bullets stop flying? Do the shells stop sailing over the trenches? Do the drones stop flying? The missiles stop being launched? Does it stop? That's all that really matters. And then, what kind of guarantees does the West provide Ukraine if, in fact, they cede territory as Putin demanded? We don't even know if Ukraine's going to say yes or no. We don't know. But we'll watch that space closely. Second big story of the day is that Hamas, the remnant of the terrorist organization that began a war almost 2 years ago by invading Israel, murdering 1,200, wounding 5,000, kidnapping 250, they're on their last legs, and the IDF is about to begin the clearing and holding of Gaza City. That means the end of Hamas if they successfully complete that. They have cleared and are holding many cities in the Gaza Strip, but Gaza City is home to more than 1 million Palestinians and probably the 10 to 20,000 Hamas terrorists who are left, all of whom were not even on the scorecard. They weren't even at AAA in terrorist language when the war began. Everybody's dead in Hamas. They're being run by rookies and not being run very well. And the IDF is going to methodically move through Gaza City. Now, they will booby trap houses, and the IDF has combat engineers. They don't really want to pay any of the price that's so high already. It's almost, I believe it's now more than 500 IDF soldiers have been killed since 10/7. Some were killed on 10/7, but 500 have been killed in the Gaza operation. Multiply that by 30 and you get an idea of what the American equivalent would be. Imagine losing 15,000 American troops in 2 years. Right? We lost about half that number over 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and still those wars were unpopular. Israel has lost more than 500 members of its defense forces in the last year and 10 months. They're going to, however, finish the job. So when it turns out that Macron and Keir Starmer and Mark Carney, the leaders respectively of France, the United Kingdom, and Canada, have absolutely zero influence on Israel and on Prime Minister Netanyahu and his security cabinet, Hamas is surprised. And they sent word today that they want to go back to the table and negotiate. They want to accept what was known as the Witkoff offer, where it would be a 60-day pause. 10 hostages out of the 20 living hostages would be released. About half of the remains of those who were killed in captivity will be released. That was the Witkoff proposal. But the prime minister has said they're no longer interested in a partial deal. Hamas, you want to negotiate an end to this? By all means, we can do that. And they sent their negotiators back to Qatar, I believe, today. But Hamas sent the word in that they want the other deal, the one they walked away from when Macron stepped in it. And it's widely now regarded that Macron condemn those 10 people to the additional weeks of captivity they are spending and possibly their lives by acting when he did to kill the negotiation. He's not very smart. He just isn't. I think people now understand Macron was a good-looking guy who got elected by the French who liked his style and then realized too late he's just kind of an empty suit. Not unlike Justin Trudeau, who's been replaced by Carney, who's a left-winger, and Keir Starmer, who's a hard lefty. So the world has not exactly got its A-team, but they do have Donald Trump in the room. So Zelensky and Trump will hammer out whether or not there's a deal to be done with Putin. I'll keep you posted on that. I'll also keep you posted on the Hamas negotiations. I'm watching it as we go along. But I do want to tell you about this morning. I have an X account. I have two X accounts. HHS Links, where when I do an interview, for example, with Jason Chaffetz, we'll post the entire interview and I'll repost it on my private account. But my private account's where I DM people and stuff like that, but almost every morning. Certainly now that the mornings are quiet again. When I had 3-year-olds in the house, the mornings were always reading, right? If you can get a 3-year-old just to be quiet, not wake up the rest of the house, the grandparents do the reading. So haven't been doing my normal routine for a few weeks, but went back to it this morning and I realized that I have, for many, many years now, since news items became a thing, I have been posting 2 or 3 of the news items every day. Now, I'm an investor in news items, and I invested in it because I've been reading it for years before the opportunity to invest in it came along. But I love news items because it's about, a 20-minute read. It's got every major story in the world. It is objective. It is fact-driven. It has links to the original sources. And it's not full of TDS. There's no Trump derangements. It's not pro-Trump. It's not anti-Trump. It's actually the old-style news. So as I was doing this, I said, I pay for news items. I am a subscriber as well as an investor. And I began to think. Then I went out for my 6-mile trundle. On the trundle, I was thinking, okay, you recommend everyone get news items. What are you buying that you no longer need? Now, I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. I also subscribe to news items, Dan Senor's ARC Media, which is Call Me Back Insider. I subscribe to the Global Post, and I pay for a couple of other things. But I made a list, and I realized I am buying the Atlantic. And the Atlantic has not had value for me for many years. The Atlantic has got a terrible case of TDS. It's across the entire thing. So I got home from my trundle, and I got online, and I went to manage my subscription. I canceled it. Turns out I bought it through next May, so it'll keep coming, or they'll keep sending me pushes. And they immediately, when you cancel, they send you new offers, special deals. Now, I've been going through this for a long time. I started with the LA Times years ago, dumped that, dumped the everything else. I just told you what I subscribe to. And I really do think, given that the Washington Free Beacon is out there, I'm going to talk with Vic Mattis about this later this hour, given that the Washington Free Beacon is out there, given that the podcast world is so full of free offerings like the Commentary podcast Monday through Friday, it's doing summer shows this week because they're all on vacation, so it's like the best Broadway musicals ever and the best novels ever. It's not news. And so I'm not listening to it, but I did listen to Dan Senor talking to Nadav Ayal today about where we are in negotiation. You can stay informed without a newspaper, without a subscription. Then I realized it's such a bad day for legacy media. MSNBC announced today they're changing their name to MS Now. And I can't remember what now. They're being mocked relentlessly because they're mockable. MS Now, MSNOW, MS Now. News, Opinion, World. No, it's my source for left-wing TDS. They ought to just renamed it TDS. It would have been Truth in Advertising. They would have got a few more marginal people. MS is a wreck. But then came the story from the Washington Free Beacon. PBS, Public Broadcast System, which is no longer public, slashes its budget by over 20%. And the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is shutting down completely. That's after the $1.1 billion rescission of funds that Congress passed last month. PBS is reportedly cutting its budget by 21%. 21%. Remember they always told us, we don't get that much money from the federal government? Remember they told you that again? I used to work for PBS. I worked for PBS for 10 years, from 1992 to 2002. I did the begathons. Every quarter we'd do a begathon. I'd show up at the studio and we'd spend 3 hours asking, it was during the Civil War or the Brooklyn Bridge, some Ken Burns documentary. I did a national show for him, Searching for God in America. In the 90s, they were left-wing, but they weren't crazy left-wing. And in those days, the NewsHour really was not so completely, utterly left-wing. David Brooks has moved significantly to the left. Well, for the Corporation for Public Broadcast to lay off everyone, wow, boy, did they depend on money. And for PBS to cut 21% of their budget, well, yes, indeed, they did indeed need the money from the federal government to do what they have been doing, and they're doing it for a smaller and smaller audience because they are so left-wing. Here's the bottom line, what I posted on X. I think most of legacy media will be gone within 5 years. I just don't think they can subscribe. They can't get subscription. They can't get ads. People don't want to advertise on MSNBC, soon to be MS Now. They don't want to be categorized as having TDS. The Atlantic is a vanity project of some billionaire. That'll keep going. But I got to tell you right now, legacy media is going through the pain of having identified on the 20% of every 80-20 issue in America, like the Democratic Party. Secretary Rubio did the Triple Crown yesterday. It used to be the Triple Crown. It's not really anymore because nobody's watching. But ABC this week, NBC Meet the Press, and Face the Nation. Let's get a few samples of what the Secretary said. Let's start with Martha Raddatz on This Week, cut number 1, Secretary Rubio.
Critics of President Trump will say the pomp and circumstance, the red carpet, the warm handshake, that President Trump simply lost that Putin gained there just by being on the world stage and walking down a red carpet with the president. Your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, critics of President Trump are always going to find something to criticize. You don't even pay attention to it anymore. But I will tell you this, Putin is already on the world stage. He's already on the world stage. The guy's conducting a full-scale war in Ukraine. He's already on the world stage. He has the world's largest tactical nuclear arsenal in the world and the second largest strategic nuclear arsenal in the world. He's already on the world stage. When I hear people say that, oh, it elevates him, well, all we do is talk about Putin all the time. All the media's done is talk about Putin all the time for the last 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean he's right about the war. That doesn't mean he's justified about the war. Put all that aside. It means you're not going to have a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. You're not going to end a war between Russia and Ukraine without dealing with Putin. That's just common sense. I shouldn't even have to say it. So people can say whatever they want. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to get the Russian side to agree to things that they don't want to agree to if we're going to have peace. If not, there'll just be a war. They'll keep killing each other. And life will go on in America and in the rest of the world, but not for Ukraine. So the president has invested a lot of time in trying to bring an end to this war. He deserves credit for doing that. He gets criticism for doing that. He could have just let this war go on. The president could have just said, this is Biden's war. It started under him. We'll do what we can for Ukraine, but we're going to focus on other things. He could have easily said that. But he's the only leader in the world that can get Putin to a meeting to talk about serious things.
All right, so roll right over, Martha, because actually I don't think anyone out there other than the legacy media is criticizing the red carpet or the attempt to bring peace to Ukraine. But the legacy media hates Trump, so they had to come up with that. More Martha Raddatz and Secretary Rubio, cut number 2.
Does the president favor giving up territory that Ukraine now controls, specifically in the Donetsk region? Sources are telling us that's what was asked.
Well, first of all, I mean, Putin has given repeated speeches now for 2.5 years. There's one they always cite, which talks about taking most of Ukraine and his view of history and how, so forth and so on. The second thing the president, so we know what their side is demanding, and we obviously know the Ukrainians are not in agreement with any of that. The second point I would make is the president has said repeatedly, when it comes to territories and territorial claims, that's ultimately something Ukraine will have to decide. It's their territory. It's their country. Ultimately, what they're willing to live with is what they'll have to decide on. Maybe the answer is they're not willing to live with any of this. We don't know, but that's what we need to explore. In the meantime, the one thing we do know that Ukraine has said repeatedly and publicly talked about is security guarantees. They need to be able to enter into security guarantees that ensure that this is never going to happen again, that they're not going to get reinvaded in 2.5 or 3 years or 4 years or whenever it may be. They don't want to be back here again. They want to be able to go on to rebuild their country and live their lives. That's a very reasonable request. That's something we're working on, and that's something the Russian side has to understand, obviously, is that as a sovereign country, Ukraine has a right, like every sovereign country, to enter into security alliances and agreements with other countries. So these are some of the things that we'll be discussing.
And then cut number 3.
Can you name any concessions that Vladimir Putin made during this meeting? Have any
I wouldn't name him on your
concessions?
program.
Have any
I
concessions
wouldn't name
been
him
asked?
on your program. Why would I do that?
Where is the
Well,
pressure?
of course, because you can't have a peace agreement. No, you can't have a peace agreement unless both sides give and get. You can't have a peace agreement unless both sides make concessions. That's a fact. That's true in virtually any negotiation. If not, it's just called surrender. And neither side is going to surrender. So both sides are going to have to make concessions. So, of course, concessions were asked. But what utility would there be of me going on a program and tell you we wagged our finger at Putin and told him you must do this and you must do that? It's only going to make it harder and less likely that they're going to agree to these things. So these negotiations, as much as everyone would love it to be a live pay-per-view event, these discussions only work best when they are conducted privately in serious negotiations in which people who have to go back and respond to constituencies, because even totalitarian governments have constituencies they have to respond to, people have to go back and defend these agreements that they make, and figure out a way to explain them to people. So we need to create space for concessions to be made. But of course, concessions were asked.
And then he went over to NBC to talk to Kristen Welker, cut number 4.
Is a ceasefire now off the table, Mr. Secretary?
No, it's not off the table. I think what the president said, in fact, you just read it on the air a few moments ago, it was agreed to by all that the best way to end this conflict is through a full peace deal. There's no doubt about that. I mean, who would be against the fact if tomorrow we came to you and said we have a full peace deal and it's done? I think that's the best way to end the war. Now, whether there needs to be a ceasefire on the way there, well, we've advocated for that. Unfortunately, the Russians, as of now, have not agreed to that. But the ideal here, what we're aiming for here is not a ceasefire. What we ultimately are aiming for is an end to this war.
And then cut number 5.
Well, that's what these negotiations are about. And as you can imagine, everybody goes into a negotiation wanting 100% of what they want. That includes Ukraine, but obviously the Russians. And the only way to reach a deal on anything, whether it's in business or in politics or in geopolitics, the only way to reach a deal is for each side to get something and each side to give something. And that's been very difficult. If it was easy, this wouldn't have been going on for 3.5 years. Understand, the longer these wars go on, the harder they are to end, unfortunately, because one side is always looking for leverage on the other, in this particular case, the Russian side as well. And so I think that's the core of what we're trying to work through here. That's why Zelensky's coming tomorrow. That's why European leaders are coming tomorrow. That's why the president called them from the airplane, spent 2 hours in the middle of the night talking to them. And that's why we've been engaged with them every step of the way, is we are trying to find what can we get to that both sides can agree on. And it's been difficult. This is a hard issue set, but we're dedicating a lot of time to it, and the president deserves credit for dedicating time to it.
And I understand that these negotiations...
Now I will come back with Margaret Brennan later in the program. Martha Raddatz and Kristen Welker did okay with the secretary. Margaret Brennan did not. It's like a race to the bottom, and she won in terms of losing audience because Kristen was professional as usual, Mr. Secretary. Margaret has just lost touch with what originally got her the job. She was a centrist and people didn't know her politics. Now TDS has got her in its grip. Let me talk to you about another one of our sponsors, Americans for a Balanced Budget. Americans for a Balanced Budget are running a website, StopHealthCostHikes.com. In the one big beautiful bill, there were a lot of wins for taxpayers, but they did not extend the tax credits for people obliged to buy their insurance in the Obamacare state insurance in exchanges. Obamacare was made palatable. It cost everyone a fortune who lost their health care. It really screwed so many millions of Americans. I tried to tell you at the time, so did every Republican. It almost got stopped, but what got passed is just a nightmare. Congress helped out for 10 years by providing tax credits for people who lost their insurance or were obliged by unions pulling back or employers pulling back or people going to 1099 employment relations. They cut their losses by going to the Obamacare state-run exchanges, and Congress ponied up with tax credits for them. Those tax credits were not extended in the one big beautiful bill. About 24 million Americans use those tax credits, and they will lose those tax credits next year unless Congress acts before then to extend the tax credits. Head to StopHealthCostHikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. One more time, StopHealthCostHikes.com. I was on Fox last night with Trey Gowdy, Sunday Nights with Trey Gowdy. Here's what we talked about. Adam Schiff, cut number 11.
Joining us is Hugh Hewitt, host of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome, Professor, I might add, a really good lawyer. The fact that Adam Schiff leaks should not surprise anyone. But leaking classified information, I'm almost positive, is a crime.
Good evening, Trey. It's not only is it a crime, it's a crime under a lot of different statutes. So I just took a look at one, the Espionage Act. It's got a 10-year statute of limitations. So if then Congressman, now Senator Schiff, directed anyone to leak information that was classified after 2015, he's still subject to liability for that leak. Moreover, this whistleblower originally turned in his complaint to the FBI in 2017, renewed it in 2023. I think it sets up the basis for the FBI to pay a call on Senator Schiff and ask him some questions about what he did. Now, the senator's already said that there is a real person. It is a real allegation. Then he adopted, it's not my dog, it didn't bite you. Besides, you kicked him first offense by saying, liar, liar, old, rehashed, already disposed of, asked and answered, all the lawyer stuff. I want the audience to know one thing. There is hard to find someone less significant in Washington, D.C. in office than Adam Schiff. Among the 47 Democratic senators, he is 42nd in seniority. He's 65 years old. He's never going to have any position of authority or power again if actuarial tables are within 10 years of being correct, maybe even 20. So I don't want people to get too upset if he walks, because there's only this one FBI report that Director Patel released and sent over to Justice. They might sit down with Adam Schiff. He'll invoke the fifth in a quiet setting. You're the prosecutor. I'm just the law teacher. I think he can get away with it. But the fact of the matter is, his credibility has been in tatters since he was censured by the House of Representatives. And if anyone wants to go back and read that detailed indictment, I think he'd left the Congress by then, Congressman, a detailed indictment of everything Adam Schiff did that was really diabolical, your word. By the way, I didn't know you're one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Good to know you've been promoted. But it's just that, to me, he's a laughing stock, and he's never not going to be a laughing stock. You agree with that?
I do, and I think your broader point is society can punish people too. It doesn't always have to be the justice system. But not only was he awful to Donald Trump and his family members and others like Hope Hicks, he was awful to Kash Patel. I'm sure he didn't realize at the time Kash would become the FBI director. But my question for you, Professor, we did not go from Jim Comey to Kash Patel. There was an FBI director in the interim. And I just wonder what Chris Wray did. To your point, if twice this information is brought to you, what did the FBI do when they had it before Kash Patel?
What I would like the director to let us know is who took the initial whistleblower report? Was their name struck? Did he consult with a lawyer named Page at the FBI about this whistleblower report about being directed to leak information? We don't really know who that report was made to. We don't know if it's probative. Not every allegation is true. You know that. I know that. The FBI's got to build a case. But it would seem to me logical with this whistleblower coming back a second time around, he or she either feels that they were not done justice in 2017, so they're back in 2023, or they believe that in 2017, it got filed away under the Russia dossier noise and the Mueller report. They probably gave it to the Mueller staff that buried it because they were full of people who are experts at misleading as well. Bottom line, I think the FBI ought to ask for an appointment with Senator Schiff, if they can find him, if they can recognize him, if they can see him anywhere in D.C., and say, let's talk about these allegations. Did you direct your staff to leak classified information? And then I'd like to know if he takes the fifth, or if he admits to doing it, or if he denies it. Then you've got someone doing what the FBI likes to do, False Statements Act. And you know that well. I'm sure you prosecuted a number of people for False Statements Act. And that is, or saw a lot of people prosecuted for False Statements Act. That's the gotcha that Adam Schiff has to worry about. But mostly, we're all laughing at him tonight because there really is zero. I can't think of anyone of less significance in the United States Senate than Adam Schiff, given the combination of his junior status in the Senate and his advanced age in the Senate.
Well, from your lips to God's ears on his irrelevance, and a big thank you to Kevin McCarthy. People forget it was Kevin McCarthy that took him off the House Intel Committee before he went to the Senate. So he was not in a position to have access to this information anymore. I wish I had been young enough to have you as a law professor, Hugh Hewitt, but I'm going to have to settle for having you on my show on Sunday nights. If I'd been maybe 40, 50 years younger, I could be sitting in your class right now.
Very nice of the congressman to say that. I said to him, you'd be asleep along with the rest of the students most of the time because I got to do the dormant commerce clause in my class. Vic Mattis is the arts and culture editor of the Washington Free Beacon, the co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast, and a weekly visitor here to spruce up the place with a little bit of intellectual vigor. Vic, I have a question for you. This morning I was musing online over at X, having canceled my subscription to The Atlantic this morning, that I'm down to paying for Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, news items, in which I'm also an investor. I like to disclose that. The Free Press, commentary, Call Me Back Insider, Pillar Catholic, that the Pillar is for Catholic news, and Cleveland.com for my sports stuff. And I think the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times are on thin ice with me because I don't know if they're worth the whistle. What do you pay for in media, Vic?
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to point out that the best source of information I get and your listeners can get is actually free, and it's called the Washington Free Beacon. It's free in many ways, including the Weekend Beacon section, but all the news you need. That aside, because of course I obviously work there, I do personally pay for commentary, which I enjoy. And my old boss, John Podhoretz, is the editor-in-chief over there. I do get the Free Press. I do subscribe to Wall Street Journal in print. I used to, and I agree with you. I think the news coverage it can be so atrocious on the reporting side sometimes at the Journal, particularly when it comes to the Middle East. But I still love, obviously, the editorial pages, the op-eds, and the review sections. I even read the Mansion section, Hugh, just to get myself so envious to see what it would be like to have $1 billion and spend $100,000 on a wine cave. That's, really just,
someone
it's
told me that
aspirational.
they have made a conscious decision to target the aspirationally wealthy because they do super serve with the mansion stuff and with the lifestyle stuff.
Yeah.
Today they had the oddest story, Vic, about what it's really like to support a big family on a modest income in America, about a 7-member family with one wage earner. And I thought someone must have told them that the word was out that they're super serving the luxury market. They had to bring it down a notch. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the first thought that comes to my mind is probably somebody like our friend Tim Carney. I think he's managed to do just fine, and there are other people. But yes, they do have some amazingly absurd things, particularly the gift buying guides, and that's so clearly geared towards the ultra rich. And you see that obviously in the mansion section with the advertisements for their luxury homes and condos. You can always get an island in the Bahamas or for the same price, a bungalow in Greenwich. So, really, the choice is yours.
So my question, who's going to survive? I should have mentioned the Free Beacon because I do read the Free Beacon, but I don't pay for it. And so
That's right.
I don't pay for the Times of Israel either. And I read that almost every day and I get updates from the Times of Israel, but I don't pay for it. Do you think legacy media can survive in the subscription format, not the advertising format, the subscription format?
Yeah. Well, we're about to find, the Wall Street Journal is doing just fine, particularly digital subscriptions. They've really managed to pull that off. The Washington Post, we're about to find out if it can get by. It used to have, 500, 600,000 subscribers or something like that. And it's now down to 90,000, right? But Jeff Bezos is obviously trying to turn that ship around. They hired Adam O'Neill to be the editorial page editor and trying to get a lot of their liberal writers and columnists to agree to a buyout. Karen Attiah is refusing that right now, but many others have. It'll really depend on who they bring on board. And if they can convince people like, you and me, obviously you have a history with them, but, to go back and read the Washington Post.
You mean my quitting cost them 510,000 subscripts? Is that what you're saying,
Yes,
Vic?
I believe it's a price that they'll forever, they'll rue the day that happened, Hugh. But, no, I mean,
I didn't realize they only have 90,000 subscribers. Really?
Yeah. At least for I believe that's the print number. And the Journal is obviously doing much better. But
Wow.
eventually, everybody is going to be digitalized, and that's the big challenge that all those publications are going to face. And again, I get the Washington Post through work. I wouldn't want to pay for that personally. And then, of course, back in the day, though, I subscribed to a lot of different things, as did you. I loved getting
Yep.
daily variety, and they had a Washington.
And I got the
office
LA
that shut down.
Times, and I even bought the New York Times, and I'm not a crossword puzzle person. I'm not a Wordle person. I bought the New York Times because they had foreign coverage. But basically, everything is at your fingertips if you curate your X account correctly. And podcast, actually, commentary makes me a better informed person every day I listen to their podcast. Every single day. Same with Getting Hammered when you guys are not on hiatus. But you are the laziest podcasters in America right now. So your August includes like June, July, and September. So lots of people aren't working today.
We're doing like European summer hours right now. I think they take what 8 week vacation. So we're like the French. We're going to come back at some point. You'll have to ask your other contributor, Mary Catherine Ham. We'll get the band back together like Oasis did, and it'll be very successful.
Okay, but
once
Vic,
that
you're the
happens.
arts and culture editor, so I have to get the arts and culture editor's take on MSNBC's new name, MS Now, which is short, like news, opinion, world, MS Now, and it's being much mocked by people who are normal. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. When I hear MS, the first thing I think of is multiple sclerosis, and you want MS never, let alone MS now. The fact is, NBC wanted a clean break from that particular network, obviously being sold to Versant. On the other hand, CNBC gets to keep their name. NBC and the Peacock have no problems with their logo with CNBC, but they definitely had a problem. I think just as damaging as that network no longer being able to say NBC, they can't have the Peacock, one of the most recognizable brands in the world. And that tells
where are
you
they
something.
going to operate? Has the Free Beacon dug deep yet? They had the whole third floor at 30 Rock, and they had a lot of the NBC. I worked for them for 4 years. Where are they physically going? Do you know?
No, I mean maybe they can go out to to Secaucus, New Jersey, just over the river, which is a number of networks are out there. Jersey networks are out there. Maybe that's what happens. I remember in the olden days, CNBC was out of Fort Lee, New Jersey. Maybe they'll end up on the other side of the Hudson. Who knows? But I think tough times are ahead for them.
Victorina Mattis on X. Go and like and subscribe to Getting Hammered, his podcast with Mary Catherine Ham. When they're done with their French summer, they'll go back to work and make us happy again. Vic, thank you so much. I just reposted at the top of my X feed the list of things that I pay for in legacy media and in new media, because it's a long list. I'm a journalist. I got to get this stuff. But I've also just begun throwing overboard stuff that is of no value or which has lost objectivity. Now, there are only two ways for a media site that's in the news business, not entertainment but news, to survive. One is by subscription and the other is by advertising. I do both. You can subscribe to the Universe. If you want to be getting and conversing with me via my subtext channel, if you want to get special questions and special content, and you want every minute of every show going back 25 years, then you subscribe to the Universe. If you just want, like my interview with Jason Chaffetz today, we interrupted a part of that on the Salem News Channel to show some of President Trump's opening remarks with President Zelensky. So Jason Chaffetz, he'll be on my YouTube channel later, and he's also coming up in hour number 3 today. So you can get the entire Jason Chaffetz interview if you want to watch Jason, as well as hear him in your car if you're driving. And you can also get my podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh. I love for you to like and subscribe to the podcast. I love for you to like and subscribe my YouTube channel. And I want you to always listen to the radio, television program. Watch it on Salem News Channel. Listen in your car. Listen at home if you're walking around on your earphones, whatever. But I have to advertise. I have to put advertisers on. For example, Relief Factor is a sponsor. Now, I select my sponsors very carefully. I have to use the product. Next hour, Ty Lassiter is going to be here as one of my sponsors, embedded into the program, talking to you about Key City Capital, in which I'm an investor. They are a sponsor. It's a complicated thing. Listen to disclosures. But Relief Factor is just an advertiser. You know what NPR is doing? NPR is cutting 20% of their budget, 21% of their budget, because they lost federal funding. If I had to cut 21% of my budget, I wouldn't know what to do. If I lost 21% of my advertising, I wouldn't know what to do. We've gained year over year over year over year for 25 years because the show has gotten bigger and bigger because there are fewer and fewer places that are fair, objective, and fun and cover the Browns, the Guardians, the Cavaliers, and the Ohio State University National Championship Buckeyes. Very few people do that. Relief Factor came in early, and they every single hour, I remind you, I take it every day. Got my 6 miles in this morning. I did 3 weeks at Max Grandkids. 3 weeks, Max Grandkids. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. And I credit Relief Factor. No strange, I'm bruised, I'm tired, but I'm full of joy, and I'm not hurting in any significant way because I take my Relief Factor every day. 4 pills, Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. They work together to strengthen your body's anti-inflammatory system, which of course is the source most of the time of discomfort, minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. You ought to get Relief Factor too. Call them, 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website and find that starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day. You can find that at relieffactor.com. You can ask for it at 1-800, the number 4-RELIEF, 1-800, the number 4-RELIEF, or you can go to the website and find it there, relieffactor.com, $19.95 for 3 weeks. I'm reading John Roberts, who, of course, anchors over at Fox, and John posted, I've covered the White House for more than a decade and never witnessed a meeting like this. And I've just retweeted it. If you go to my X file, you can see the picture he pointed out. And it's the EU president, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the new Chancellor of Germany, there's President Zelensky. On the left, appropriately, of President Trump is Macron, the little guy. I think it's Meloni of Italy next, and then the German, and then Mark Rutte, who is the Secretary General of Denmark. And Meloni is really a hoot. And John Roberts is noting summits are not normally held at the White House. When you get NATO together, they usually go to like Williamsburg. I can remember doing the Williamsburg summit for the G7. But when NATO gets together, they're usually off somewhere. They haven't come to the White House before. To my knowledge, I don't remember it either. It's kind of wild. Why are they all there? Because Trump makes the weather. Trump met with Putin. They want to get debriefed on what he and Putin talked about. They want to find out if there's any way to end the killing, the slaughter, to get some kind of security guarantee. I don't know if Trump can pull it off. I doubt that anyone else could. And so this is maybe the last best chance for Putin to get out without killing another million Russians or wounding. I think their casualties 1 million. And of course, Ukraine is suffering terribly. The world is suffering terribly. But the president has a pretty good track record over 6 months. He got Pakistan and India to stop shooting at each other. They got the Democratic Republic of Congo and the militia backed by Rwanda to sign a peace deal. He got Azerbaijan to stop with Armenia and Armenia to stop with Azerbaijan. He got the Cambodians to stop shooting at the Thais and the Thais to stop shooting at the Cambodians. He got some hostages out of Israel. He put Iran back. I was listening to Nadav Eyal this morning on Call Me Back Insider. And Nadav, I quoted him on my X account, said the assessments are in. It appears as though the Iranians are giving up on their nuclear program because it's totally demolished. In other words, it's obliterated. Remember how the legacy media wanted to deny Trump the use of the word obliterated, even though they had no access to anything? And in fact, now there have been assessments underway for a couple of months. Not only was it obliterated, it's so badly obliterated, Iran appears not to be even thinking about restarting it. Probably because they're going to glow if they go down in one of those sites where the 12 deep penetrating projectiles went in and blew up all the enriched uranium, Fordo. So he's had a good run. Can he pull off Russia-Ukraine? Don't know. Putin's a psychopath. You know that, and I know that. He's a war criminal, and he's a psychopath. But he's also going to be broke soon. He's got no money with which to resupply Iran. His entire investment in Syria is wiped out. His entire investment in Iran is wiped out. China's keeping him afloat, but China really wants Manchuria back, which the Russians stole from when they were Russia. I'm not sure about this opening. No one will know. We'll cover it extensively whenever it happens here on the Salem News Channel. When they break and have a press conference, we'll pick it up. I'm sure we'll break into my coverage or whatever else is going on at that time to tell you what's going on. But we will let you know. I wanted to take this opportunity because right now it's 5:09 on the East Coast, live, 5:09. And that means everybody who works for state and local government on the East Coast has left. All right, they all gone home. They clock hit 5, state and local government employees get up and they leave. Now that's not always true. They might have a night meeting. Once a quarter they might have to stay late and do a night meeting for the public so that they can listen to the public and then be indifferent to their demands. But I wanted you to hear this story from the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. It requires that I read a little bit, so I got to look down. And I apologize for that for those who are watching on the Salem News Channel. The headline is, "A Michigan town clamped down on its wineries. Now it owes them $49 million. A peninsula enclave looks at desperate measures like selling a lighthouse and public park after rules against events at local wineries lead to a massive judgment," by Joe Barrett. Boy, this makes me happy. And I got nothing against Old Mission Peninsula, Michigan, but for 27 years I was in the land use practice. Most of it dealt with state and local government, a lot of it with the feds. And they're always routinely trampling on property rights. They're always routinely making people's lives more difficult. They are never, or rarely, in the business of actually helping you. I had one guy help me in the last 5 years from a local government, and state government never, forget it. Abandon hope, all you who enter there. This 19-mile stretch of rolling hills, cherry orchards, and vineyards sweeping down to Grand Traverse Bay, gorgeous in the summer, brutally cold in the winter, has become an unlikely ground zero for a fierce standoff. It is a Midwestern winemaking mecca. But on one side, wineries seeking alternative revenue streams. On the other, farmers and homeowners who fear rowdy weddings and brides gone wild will shatter their agricultural enclave. Stop right there. There are no farmers. There are no neighbors who are fearing rowdy weddings. That's not happening. They made that up. They just make that stuff up. They have no right to tell these wineries what to do with their property if it's agriculture. For years, the factions have feuded over what events vintners can host. Again, not faction. The local government got hit. The local government feuded with the wineries. The local government got hit with the $49 million judgment. Peninsula Township officials crafted intricate rules, including tying guest counts to grape purchases and dictating what music genres could grace vineyards. It's as though a homeowners association on steroids took over a township. Fed up winemakers sued in 2020. Then came the bombshell. Last month, a federal judge in Kalamazoo ordered the tiny locale, population 6,000, to pay the wineries $49.3 million in lost revenue over zoning ordinances the court found unconstitutional and in violation of Michigan law. Where will the money come from? I don't care. I don't care. I want every state and local person to understand. The federal courts are getting serious about property rights. It's the last best hope for America is for the federal courts to begin again to remember that the Fifth Amendment guarantees that nobody's private property shall be taken for public use without just compensation. And that includes regulatory takings. Now, for a long period of time, especially peaking in the Penn Central case from the late 70s, Supreme Court got all fuzzy and woozy and they didn't know what to do and they liked the government and they thought the government would go up. This got started in 1926 in Ohio, Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty. The least favorite Supreme Court decision still on the books and one I hope they overturn. There was no zoning before 1926. There still is no zoning in places like Houston. All right, there's the police power. They can shut you down at 2 a.m. in the morning if you got a liquor license. That's an entitlement that you get from the state, which is allowed under the Constitution to regulate the sale and purchase of alcohol and have any crazy rules it wants. But you cannot tell a winery that you've licensed to be a winery how to operate. It's not the government's business. It's not the government's business, period. They should not be in the zoning business. They might want to bring private nuisance action. Nuisance laws worked until 1926. You can't ruin your property, your neighbor's property. You can't put a pig farm next to a luxury hotel. But if you build a luxury hotel next to the pig farm, That's the luxury hotels problem. It was pretty easy to learn nuisance law and property back in 1980. That's when I learned property from Roger Bam Bam Cunningham, University of Michigan Law School forever. Great property professor. I even once knew the rule against perpetuities. But I'm here to tell you, this kind of judgment is not going to be the last. 49 million. So if you're driving home from City Hall tonight, or you work for the county, or you work for the township, or you work for the state, realize the law is changing. And this story is about you. Because what does a 6,000 person township do with $49 million? They go bankrupt. What happens when you go bankrupt? The pension fund goes bankrupt. What happened? You lay off. When Detroit went bankrupt, they had to lay off half their cops or cut the pensions of them. I couldn't remember. Something very inequitable, very unjust. State and municipalities, states can't go bankrupt under the bankruptcy code, but local governments can, bond districts can, and especially counties. I was in Orange County when it went bankrupt. 2 out of the 5 supervisors wanted me to become the executive officer of the county. I said, fine, I'm not going to raise taxes, though. They wanted to raise taxes. They hired someone else. They took a tax measure to the butt. I led the effort against it and got it crushed because they have too much of your money already, and they ought to leave the property alone. So I want to say to the township of Old Mission Peninsula, you are bankrupt. Sell everything and get out of the business of regulate. I want to say to homeowners associations as well, the same thing is going to happen to you, because unless it's in the covenants that people agreed to, you can't do what you think you can do. I really, really want government to get back in the box. I want homeowners associations to get back in their boxes, and I want them to read the Wall Street Journal. A Michigan town clamped down on its wineries. Now it owes them $49 million. They didn't clamp down. They took their property. And you can't do that, government. You cannot do that. The bill comes due. Boy, is it coming due for Old Mission Peninsula, Michigan. One of my favorite segments of the week, Bethany Mandel, is with me. She is the author, co-founder of the Mom Wars Substack, which is themomwars.substack.com. She's also the author of Stolen Youth, co-author of that. Bethany, it's been a very bad day for the media. And it began, I began it because I canceled my subscription to The Atlantic. I finally just did an inventory of what I pay for, and I can't pay for this anymore. It's got no value. Corporation for Public Broadcasting closing its doors, announced today. PBS cutting its budget by 21%. MSNBC has changed its name to MS Now, and is being widely mocked for the obvious reason that MS is not something you want to, my mother-in-law died from MS and struggled with it for 20 plus years, so it's nothing to laugh about, but MS Now is getting widely panned. So I've been asking Vic Madison, now what media do you actually pay for?
So I'm glad that you gave me a heads up that you were going to ask me this question beforehand, because I had to think about it. So a couple Substacks, The Free Press and Emily Oster. She does a parenting Substack.
Oh yeah,
so
my daughter tells me all about Emily Oster. Yeah.
I love her. So print magazines, this sounds ridiculous, but I pay for the Washington Examiner magazine and Commentary magazine. My husband was an employee at one, is currently an employee at the other, but I do not get comped for either of those and never have. And I think that's ridiculous. But I am a paying subscriber at both because I never got comped, despite my husband working at both.
Okay.
And then
I think we should strike. We should strike.
No. And I want to be comped, but I'm not comped. So whatever. So I pay for both of those. This is a weird, very niche thing, but the Circle magazine, it's an Orthodox Jewish kids magazine, is my most expensive subscription. It's over $200 a year, and it is fantastic. So if any of your listeners are Orthodox Jews, the Circle.
Tell me what
very,
it is again.
good.
The Circle?
It's an Orthodox Jewish kids magazine. And
like,
it's fantastic.
They used to have that one that was in every dentist office. I can't remember what it was.
Like highlights or whatever?
Highlights, yes.
It's awful. It's so bad. During COVID, they were all wearing masks and had articles about how if you care about other people, you'll wear masks. And the Circle magazine
didn't know highlights
had articles
highlights
making
went
fun of it.
woke. Highlights
Yes,
went woke.
yes.
Oh no.
Yes, it's so bad.
So Bethany, my list is I pay for the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. I pay for news items. I'm also an investor in that. The Free Press and Commentary, we overlap. I pay for ARC Media, which is Dan Senor's
Yeah.
Call Me Back Insider. I pay for Pillar, which is Pillar Catholic, and that's
The Catholic,
the
yes.
equivalent of your.
I love.
I'm Catholic.
I
And
subscribe, but I'm not a
Cleveland.com
paying
for my
subscriber.
sports stuff. So what else do you think legacy media is doomed? Because
I mean,
those
if
are
you
all
look
niche.
at that list, it's not great. I do subscribe to New York Times cooking only. Does that
Oh, I didn't know
count?
that was an option. Well, I get the
Yes,
Athletic.
only. I think that the cooking section for the New York Times is holding that whole business model afloat because it's fantastic.
I think John Podhoretz has made the argument with Seth occasionally that Wordle and cooking is keeping the New York Times afloat. Puzzles,
Yes.
crossword puzzles. I quit the New York Times except for the Athletic, but I've got to go back and amend my list because I've forgotten. I may cancel the Athletic now. It's terrible. It's gotten really bad since the Times bought it. But so the bottom line, do you think in 5 years we'll recognize anything in media? Do you think the Journal and the Financial Times survive?
So, I mean, it was interesting because you were talking during the last segment with Vic about how few subscribers the Washington Post has. I mean, they
Yeah.
have Bezos to keep them afloat, and that is how they're afloat. I've heard whisperings, and I think that you actually might have something to do with it, that they're trying to expand their opinion pages to be more representative of folks like us. Um, I'm curious to see how that goes. Have they messaged you? Have they reached
Oh,
out?
absolutely. No, they would never. I have signed a contract with Fox, so I write 2 columns a week for them, and I write for the Examiner, so I'm not going back to the Post. But they haven't. No, they will never go back. They need to lower their demo, Bethany.
Yes.
Don't you think they ought to be focusing on young moms and young dads?
You'd think, right? You'd think.
And how hard would that
I-
be to do a parents page? It would be like the easiest thing to do in the world is a parents page that was actually for parents.
Yeah. So Alyssa Rosenberg just left the Washington Post, and she was very good on that kind of content. And she, full disclosure, she's a friend, and I haven't gotten the scoop of why she left. But if they wanted that content, it should have been through Alyssa Rosenberg. I'm curious to see. But
And I'm wondering, you mentioned Emily Oster. Every young mom I know, like you and my daughter and Mary Catherine Ham and all of you, you all read Emily Oster. I'm amazed someone hasn't bought her. I don't mean
I know.
buy her. I mean buy her product, right?
No.
Sign her. 'Cause
Yeah, for
it
sure.
just brings all the subscribers with her.
yep, 100%.
Last quick question, Bethany. Dan Senor today, Nadav Eyal, says, quote, the damage is so substantial to Iran's nuclear weapons program, Dan, that they have basically sidelined the idea of rebuilding their nuclear program at this point. I was stunned to hear that. That's the first I've heard of it. Have you heard that from anyone else?
No, I haven't. Was that on the podcast today?
Yeah.
I
Today's
haven't, I
podcast.
haven't caught up. That's
And
what did
Nadav is
Dan
not
say?
a conservative. Yeah.
How did Dan respond?
today's.
Because he teased the segment saying that they had a disagreement. Was that what they disagreed about?
No, they did not disagree
Oh,
about
okay.
that. They disagreed. You have to listen. I'm not going to ruin the tease. But I do think people ought to subscribe to Call Me Back Insider. Bethany Mandel, go and subscribe to The Mom Wars if you are a mom, themomwars.substack.com. Thank you, Bethany. Go back and I'll talk to the editor about that commentary. I get comped by NRO because I write one piece every 3 years for them, so I would have thought they would comp you for commentary. Thank you, Bethany. Bethany Shondark, by the way, on X. That's her X handle. This is Relief Factor. I am a advertiser-driven platform, both on the Salem News Channel and Salem Radio and all of our affiliates. And I'm sponsored in this wonderful studio, and I've got studios all across the United States look exactly like this because of Relief Factor. But I would not be sponsored by Relief Factor if I did not believe in the product and if I did not, in fact, take it every day, which I do. And I needed it today after 3 weeks of peak grandchildren, full tide, 7 of them, all at once. It was fabulous. It's also exhausting. I'm pretty bruised and beaten up. But Relief Factor got me out, got my 6 miles in this morning because you come back fast if you take your Relief Factor every day. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega helps your body's anti-inflammatory system stay strong, and therefore you bounce back from your workout, from your chasing, from your wrestling, from whatever it is you're doing. It's whether you're a gym rat or you're just walking out on a beautiful August sweltering day in the Beltway, Relief Factor is for you. Call 1-800-4 and the word relief. 1-800-4 and the word relief. I know it's very nice. Dwayne is in the Beltway right now, and Dwayne tells me it's just beautiful. It was a race yesterday to see which hit 90 first, the temperature or the humidity gauge. So he's just enjoying peak Beltway. And that's why it empties out. That's why there's nobody in Washington, D.C. right now who can be anywhere else who doesn't live there year round. But Relief Factor will even get you through running or jogging or weight workouts or sculling or whatever you do, even in the district, because Relief Factor works. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website, find that starter pack for $19.95, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. So pleased to welcome back Ty Lassiter, CEO of Key City Capital. Key City Capital is a sponsor of my program, keycitycapital.com/Hugh. I always make the same disclosures whenever I check in with Ty on my money. 1, you can't invest in the fund I'm invested in. 2, he's a sponsor. 3, there's a prospectus. If you're intrigued by what we're about to talk about, get it, read it very, very closely, and I'll think of what the 4th one is before we're done. I can't remember what the 4th disclosure is. Ty, it's August. Not much is going on, but people are looking at their portfolios. They are thinking about rebalancing. What are the opportunities at Key City Capital? And by the way, we picked up 3 new affiliates since last we spoke, so you have to give them a primer on what you guys do.
Fantastic. Well, it is August and it's finally hot, at least here in Texas. But we're looking at some hot opportunities right now. We've got a new staple asset that we're looking at right now. I have not completely pulled the trigger yet. We're still running some numbers and finalizing it, but it's looking to be one of the biggest opportunities that we've had since we did M6 back in 2021. That many of your listeners have jumped in on. So I'm getting ready to take that to the market and open that up to our Fund 14 right now, which we are opening for investors to come in and participate in Fund 14. So that will be a finite raise that we will shut down once we've raised the capital needed to take down this asset. But we're focusing on investing in growth right now. So right now is the opportunity to do that. Rebalance in the marketplace right now is an opportune time. We're looking at the stock market. I think it's down a couple of points today, but it's setting high, and it's time to really take some of those chips off the table and put them into diversity. And oftentimes people look at diversification by being in different investments, maybe in the market. I look at it as how can you optimize what we call the 4 keys to wealth across your portfolio and generate cash flow, generate appreciation, generate equity, and tax advantages. And the best way to do that is true diversification, multiple asset classes.
Yeah, and I did remember the 4th disclosure. If you're going to invest with Ty and his folks, you've got to be a qualified investor. That means you know what you're doing, because the minimum investment is 6 figures. So people should know that before they call up or go to keycitycapital.com/Hugh. Ty, I wanted to run past you a headline today from Global Street. New construction of apartments hits a 10-year low. I assume part of that is just simply the cost of building, but what's going on in the marketplace? And that's actually good for people who are already in it.
Yeah, well, we were excited 2 years ago when we started seeing interest rates go up. It made it difficult to build, but we were excited because coming out of COVID, there was already low new development. We were already seeing a downward tick in new development coming out of COVID purely because of the cost of materials. Well, then we saw the interest rate hikes. And so there was a prolonged stagnant period where new development was really not happening. And so the last 3 years, we've seen a steady decline in number of new units hit the marketplace. And right now, it is a huge inverse relationship between supply and demand. And so it's an opportune time to be in the multifamily space, especially as we're seeing Americans not being able to afford housing right now. And so what we do is take affordable housing, an affordable opportunity to the marketplace to live in. And as we continue to see that inverse relationship, that opportunity for investors is just going to continue to increase as we tighten up and interest rates start coming back down. We're going to really take advantage of that appreciation because we don't have enough product in the marketplace right now.
And what I want to explain to people, the investment opportunity is this. You send your check, like the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did to Ty. You go into a fund. You're a limited partner. There's no exposure, no liability for limited partnerships, which is one of my favorite aspects of this. and then you wait as properties appreciate, the life of the fund goes on, and then Ty and his friends decide it's time to sell on or sell out or move on or recapitalize, whatever they do by fund by fund. But what I said at the beginning, the fund we got into years ago, you can't get into. Ty just mentioned Fund 14, and we got 1 minute, Ty. Is that the only one you've got open right now, or is there a Fund 13 or 15 as well?
Fund 14 is all that's open right now. 13 was a lending fund that is closed, but we've got Fund 14 open right now for a short term into the future. And as we fill that fund, we'll look at the next opportunities past that. But really, we're looking at a prime opportunity with the marketplace, with real estate where it is right now. And as we're waiting for those real estate rates to adjust, right now is the time to really get in and take advantage of what real estate can do for your portfolio.
KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh, KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh. Thank you, Ty Lasser. I'm back with Jason Chaffetz. His brand new book, They're Coming for You, in bookstores soon, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble right now. It's a wake-up call about the data world we live in. Jason Chaffetz, I want to give our listeners and viewers on the Salem News Channel a little bit of perspective here. Page 93. In the 50 most populous American cities, there are 537,000 cameras monitoring the combined 48.9 million people there. Now, I knew that was true about London, and I knew that facial recognition software and social credit scoring was ubiquitous in the People's Republic of China. I wasn't aware that our 50 largest cities had gone all in for this. When did that trend take hold?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, America loves it when there's a bad guy on the run or somebody's robbed a bank or there's a kidnapping and we can chase that person down in a few minutes. But that has been used as the Trojan horse, so to speak, to go and justify having a camera on every corner, many of which are hidden and you're not able to see them. And this is the concern. When you combine all the private cameras on top of that, whether they be Ring doorbells or whatever it might be, or some, your local grocery store, it's just, there are so many millions of cameras out there. And again, the facial recognition is probably one of the most concerning. I write about in the book that I had a hearing when I was chairman of the oversight committee with the FBI, which was supposed to disclose how they were doing this and what they were doing. And they basically lied to the American people. And I don't think the government has come clean about how much data they already have on you. And again, that they buy and sell this data. That's the scary part. They will sell it, go to a data broker, buy it back, and then be able to say, well, now I'm justified in following Hugh Hewitt in whatever grocery store that he goes to.
I never even heard of PIM, PIM eyes, or Fast People Search. These are big facial recognition companies, but probably the most staggering statistic, the asking price for data on 3 billion people. This was on page 107 of They're Coming for You. 3 billion people. You want the data on them? $3.5 million. That's a little bit like, for those who can remember the Austin Powers movies, Dr. Evil asking for $1 million. Really? 3 billion people's data is only $1.5 million bucks?
Yeah, you can go out on the dark web and you can purchase this information. Clearview AI is one of the biggest data brokers out there. I'm not saying they did anything illegal. I'm just saying they're one of the biggest. And they have sold this. In the first week of the Biden administration, the White House spent $500,000 to access their database. What does that tell you? Like, why are they doing that? Again, this is not necessarily law enforcement trying to say, hey, we're trying to track down everybody in the country who's illegal. No, they're tracking you whether or not you've done anything, even if you're a suspicionless American. So the data is fairly cheap. Like I said, it's nearly a $500 billion a year industry, but there are so many billions of bits of information. And what I'm really concerned about, which you write about in the book, is our youth. You got a 7-year-old who's growing up in this world. How do they expect any degree of privacy? This is every movement, everything they've done, and how they're manipulating kids in schools and gathering their data and their information at a very young age is just very scary.
Yeah, it occurred to me because I was surrounded by grandkids when I was reading They're Coming for You. You have to begin to teach children about cyber safety the same way you teach them about crossing streets and staying on sidewalks when they're very, very young, or before they know it, they're going to say, yeah, I want to get the people, teen people update or whatever they're reading these days. And that data is immediately brokered. That's the amazing. The market always never sleeps. There's a market for information. That market never sleeps. Tell me about the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. You write that it was set up in 2018 by Republicans under President Trump's first term, and it was fully weaponized by 2020. What do you mean by that?
Well, since they all good intent, right? Hey, let's gather this information so that we can protect against the bad guys. The problem is when you take that information and you can manipulate it and you can sell it. And again, it's not just to sell a better cup of coffee or to get somebody to the movies quicker on time. This is being used not only to market, but then it's also being used to manipulate elections and to understand who you are. I worry that it's morphing into this social credit score that you referred to earlier, the way China and others do it. So they have people that are following your gait. That is how you walk. They believe through facial recognition with an 80% certainty, they can tell you your sexual orientation. They are taking this to an extreme viewpoint, and they are debanking people. I mean, they've debanked Melania and Barron Trump. They did it to the poultry industry. They did it to the meat industry because they didn't like the businesses that they were involved with. So they match the people with the industry and say, hey, you're not allowed to participate. And because these banks and credit unions have to meet certain scores, they are rejecting people or giving higher rates to people based on where they've been, what they do, what they frequent. Are they Republicans? Are they conservatives? They don't say that out loud, but like the Denver Public Schools, which is highlighted in the book, they're not going to hire somebody who has conservative tendencies. They're just not going to do it. And so they end up with like 2 teachers that are conservatives and hundreds of students or teachers that are more liberal minded. And that's how they're able to manipulate it.
There's a screening app now used by most school districts in the United States when people apply for a job. And you ask 20, they ask and you answer 20 questions and they either say round 2 or you're out. Do you think that is using this data? I really don't know, but it just seems to me that it's an absurd way to screen people asking them 20 questions.
I think the proper answer is they might be, and that's where we have to change the law, and we have to really be careful. You talk about the young people and this sort of stranger danger. I think it's true for adults. I think it's really true for seniors. Seniors are as vulnerable as anybody to this sort of manipulation. And where we're going with the morphing of AI for these deep fakes on the voice, fakes on the videos, it looks so real at this point. This is off.
If you're going to get a phone call. Yeah, you're going to get a phone call out of the blue that says your grandchild's being held captive in Mexico. Don't pay the ransom. It's not real. Jason Chaffetz, congratulations on They're Coming for You. The book is out now. Go to Amazon.com, go to BarnesandNoble.com, pick it up in the airport. It's an eye-opener. They're Coming for You. Jason Chaffetz, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll see you again soon. I opened the show with Jason Chaffetz. I saved part of the interview for the end of the show so that I could then tell you, you really do have to take seriously what you subscribe to and what you sign into, and you really do need to get WebRoot. WebRoot is a great, great sponsor, webroot.com/Hewitt. My listeners, you've heard me talk about identity theft before. You just heard Jason Chaffetz spend 2 segments fully on exactly what kind of information is out about you, and more can be stolen, and your identity can be stolen. That's why you want WebRoot Total Protection or WebRoot Essentials. Right now, you can get 50% off either WebRoot Total Protection or WebRoot Essentials if you go to webroot.com/Hewitt. Every 2 seconds, an identity is stolen. Not surprising, given what you just heard Jason Chaffetz say. Not surprising. It takes between 100 and 200 hours to resolve identity theft on your own. Get the pros involved early. They also will make up to $1 million worth of, make you good if you've been defrauded out of that money when you buy that. Web Threat Shield also blocks bad websites before you even go there. Get a password manager, get a system optimizer, get identity protection with advanced dark web monitoring. You heard Jason Chaffetz talking about that. It includes VPN for up to 10 devices, unlimited cloud backup, restore your PC or your Mac, WebRoot Essentials will not interrupt your daily life. It installs over 6 times quicker than competitors, so do not wait. Go to webroot.com/Hewitt. Pick either WebRoot Total Protection or WebRoot Essentials. That's webroot.com/Hewitt. Let me also say andrewandtodd.com are going to be doing barn-burning business because they're in the lending you money to buy a home, and that market is picking up because interest rates are creeping down. The lowest interest rates in 2025 are now available if you're looking for a new home. Wanted to end the show by telling all of you who've been sitting on the sidelines, waiting for the Fed to act. The market's not waiting for the Fed. The market is now pricing in what the Fed is certainly going to do at their next meeting. So interest rates on the 30-year fixed loan to buy your house are falling. So go to andrewandtodd.com. They're sponsors of my show. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They're a bank. So they lend you the money. They underwrite the loan. They do it from soup to nuts. They find out how much you can afford to borrow, how much you should borrow. They get you the best rate that is possible. If you're a veteran, you want to put any money down, they can take care of you. If you're a first-time home buyer, FHA might make most sense for you. They'll talk it through with you and they'll evaluate. Senior citizens living in your own home, want to get some of your equity out, get a reverse mortgage. andrewandtodd.com, do it all. 888-888-1172. That's 888-888-1172. Wanted to close my first day back by again thanking Dwayne Patterson, who sat in for me on Monday and Wednesday, Mark Davis, who was here on Wednesday and Thursday, and of course Kurt Schlichter, who was here on Tuesday. They filled in for my week of vacation. It was great joy. It was not relaxing, but it was a great joy to have all the grandkids at once. And I hope you're having some vacation in the last 2 weeks of August.